Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Today, we're discussing a circa 2005 example of the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Yacht-Master, reference 16623, in a combination of 904L steel and yellow gold. This watch measures 40 millimeters in diameter by 11.6 millimeters thick. Lug tip to lug tip, it measures exactly 47 millimeters. If you include the solid end links of the bracelet, the distance across the wrist is a beefy 54.4 millimeters with a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. We have a older Oyster clasp design and an Oyster bracelet that you will note is from the solid end link era, but we still have hollow center links. We'll throw it on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, and it wears well. It is broad though. Because of the end links, it swells out to the edge of the wrist. I can recommend it for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters in circumference. Again, because the end links swell so broad and extend it to almost 55 millimeters across the wrist, I'm not going to recommend it for the smaller wrists I usually associate with 40 millimeter Rolex watches. That said, you can see that it is a low-slung watch at under 12 millimeters thick with a sloped bezel. It will easily slide underneath a dress cuff, as the Yacht-Master is the surf-turf aquatic Rolex, equally at home on the deck of your yacht, in the surf, or dancing in the ballroom of the yacht club. This watch is good for all of these things. Now, taking a look at the hardware and the software, I already mentioned that we're in the era of solid end links with the Yacht-Master, but hollow center links. You can see Rolex makes its own steel and its own gold. 904L steel is resistant to corrosion even in the presence of wrist sweat and sea salt, so you do not need to rinse, though I recommend rinsing this steel after that kind of exposure. That's the advantage of 904L over 316. Rolex also has a foundry where it makes its own gold. Old school Oyster clasp, single fold, it's all stamped, so you can see it's a relatively thin gauge metal, but it does have the straight through integration of yellow gold into the steel. A clamshell lock, very simple, easy to operate. Then we don't have easy link here, that would come later, but we have many degrees of adjustment with divots drilled through the clasp, so you can use your strap tool to re-anchor the bracelet inside the clasp to fine-tune the fit. Removable links are fixed in place by screws. The case is graceful. It has a lot in common with the Daytona, and I've often said that those two really are cousins in terms of case design. Elegant, compound curved case flanks, tapered lugs that are nice and narrow. This is not the super case you find on the similarly sized Submariner. Here you can see we have a triplock crown, 3 dots in steel, screw down crown rated to 100 meters, but with the triplock crown the result is probably more. The bezel, as you can see, is all yellow gold. We have a media blasted and polished insert, bidirectional rotating. This is not a dive bezel. It's used for timing the matches within a regatta. It is, after all, a Yacht-Master. So you line up with the minute hand. Now you have that 0 to 60 minute count up. I actually prefer this to a chronograph, easier to read, and no downstream service costs for a chronograph mechanism. Yellow gold hands, yellow gold indices to resist tarnish over time. A slightly off-white lume used that's beautifully just beautifully matched. Consonant, lyrical, I would say complementary to the yellow gold of the bezel. It's all of that, and then you get the blue sunburst base and that little shock of red. Yacht-Master down at 6 o'clock. A very special watch, but there's even more to it than meets the eyes. You can't quite see the date disc right here, but you will note it too has been champagne toned to perfectly match the colors of the lume as well as the hands, the indices, and the bezel. Underneath the case back, Rolex caliber 3135, automatic winding, 48-hour power reserve, 31 joules, 8 beats per second, COSC certified Swiss chronometer, quick set date, hacking second, full balance bridge with a free sprung index for shock tolerance, a handmade Breguet overcoil hairspring, so the watch will keep excellent time in any orientation with respect to gravity. That's the point of the overcoil. It centers the mass of the hairspring. And then once again, it is a COSC certified Swiss chronometer. It is also pretty well lumed. As you can see, plenty of luminescence. The Yacht-Master gained larger indices before the Submariner did. So if you look at the Yacht-Master in the 1990s and 2000s, you'll note that the indices are actually larger and better lumed than all of the dive watches, with the exception of the green Submariner. The so-called Kermit was the first Submariner in 2003 to get the larger Yacht-Master style indices. Reach out to T Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.